Okay, so this is going to probably be the final video. I'm just going to give you some tips on things you can do, and then also give you a few ideas in case you get stuck for errors. One more thing, I hope that the stuff that I taught you for Python makes sense. And the way I showed you how to use it in Vex, I know it was only like two videos and they were not like super long either or in depth, but I taught you mostly just the technique of how you'd go about doing it and also how you can apply that. And once you apply it for something as simple as motors, you can do things more complicated with it. And you can also apply it on other devices. And honestly, other devices are probably just as simple or in fact simpler than doing it with motors. So yeah, you should be mostly set, I think. Honestly, it's not that complicated. But yeah, so now one of the tips I had was if you start in block code and then you convert it to Python, you actually get a shortcut essentially. You get to skip past a lot of the tedious stuff you'd have to do otherwise. So if I have like, okay, so imagine I had some code like this, right? And I set up these devices. If you were trying to do all of this in like um, just straight up Python, right? Type all of this out, it's going to take you years. So rather what you can do is make it in block code, press this button over here, and it converts it all to Python code or even C++. Once you start looking into C++, if you do, it'll be really helpful. So you see all of this, right? And we get all of these options. Now all I have to do is click convert to text project. It's fine. And now I get all of that initialization stuff that I had to do earlier, right? I don't have to do it anymore because it automatically happened. And now I have a lot of my code already going to work here. Now all I have to do is work around what it gave me and make it better and do things more specifically. So now maybe I can incorporate loops and incorporate different functions and different actions that do different things with the devices that I set up originally in block code. This will make things much faster. Okay, so that's like the main tip I had actually, honestly. I don't have a lot more. The other tip is just look at the Vex documentation because honestly, that's your best friend. That's how I learned how to do my coding with Python on Vex. So this Vex documentation is really useful. And if you can't find things like initializing, for example, a motor, because if I recall, it doesn't actually teach you how to, does it? Yeah, it doesn't teach you how to initialize them. Oh, yeah, I don't think it teaches you how to initialize it. But if you can't figure it out, Google is also there, and so is AI if you want. But again, both of which can be unreliable, and I'm not saying that you use those as the way to code your entire project. Just use the tools as tools, just use it to help you find how to initialize it, and from there on, you can figure out how to manipulate the motor. So yeah, this is the second main tip that you should have. Use the documentation. It's very useful. You can explore through the extra links that it has, such as when it has these links and it gives you quote unquote enums, special types of stuff. And you can look into using the screen on the controller in the brain. Because honestly, using the screen on the controller is really underrated. Trust me, it could be really useful. You just need to think of how to use it. But trust me, it can be useful. Okay. Now, now let's talk about when you have errors, right? One of the biggest problems that I had was um, running out of resources. There was something that had to do with um, not enough event resources, something like that. Now, that error comes when you're trying to do two things to one device at the same time. So for example, if I told my motor to spin forward and spin in reverse somehow at the same time, you won't be able to do that probably unless you use threading, if you decide to look into threading. But if you have that error, then you need, yeah, if you look here, right, Vex uses threading. So if you really want to get advanced, you can look up how threading works and learn about it. But yeah, if you use threading, beware that you're going to get that error a lot, running out of event resources. And what that means is you have to set up a lot of conditions. So if my motor is spinning forward, then stop, then do the next function that I have that talks about it spinning the other way. Because in threading, it'll just try doing both at once and it'll come into an error. That's what the event resources is. It's when you try doing multiple things to one device or one item. Yeah. Another thing you have to keep in mind is when you have like a loop, like a while loop, right? And it's where it's continuously checking for an input, and you'll probably need a loop like that. But when it's continuously checking for input, you need to give it time to rest. You need to give it a wait, like wait 10 milliseconds. So as it says right here, wait 10 milliseconds before checking again. If you don't give it this wait, we'll have a similar issue such as the event resources thing. You're giving it too much work too quickly, and it can't handle all of that. Not to mention, your battery will die out quicker, and your motors might burn out quicker. So make sure you have a wait. If you're having a loop, you need a wait. Even if you're having a function, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure the driver control function is essentially looping. So at the end of your function, maybe try adding a wait if you're having problems. Another problem you could have is syntax. If you make a silly mistake such as saying stop like capital S or something, or if you forget to close a parentheses, or if you put an indent in the wrong place. Actually, that's more of a logic error, but yeah, if you do any of these silly mistakes, right, you'll probably get an error. It'll be a syntax error. And generally, if you read the error, it will tell you on what line it was, and it'll tell you that it is a syntax error. So all you have to do is read the error message and try to understand it, because honestly, they're not too difficult to understand usually. Another thing is there could be logic errors, and that's where there's nothing wrong with the syntax. You typed everything fine. It's just you made some mistake somewhere where logically it's not working the way you want. So if I told the code to move the robot forward, but I had set my motor's directions to be reversed or something, then my robot will actually move in reverse, even though I told it to move forward. That's what you call a logic error. So if you have a logic error, all I suggest is look into the main parts that control, like the fundamentals of what control wherever your logic error is coming from. So example, if you have a while loop and you accidentally have an indent here, it's always going to stop whatever task is happening in the auton. Whatever this is, it's always going to stop. So you'll have a logic error right there. Or if you keep this out of the loop, this will never run inside the auton function, and hence it will never run at all. So these are indents could be a major cause of your logic errors. Another thing is um, make sure you comment the right way. If you comment out the wrong thing, you could miscode. I feel like that's kind of like obvious. But of course, it's not completely wrong to comment altogether. Like commenting is very useful for documenting and organizing your code. So yeah, that's pretty much most of what it is about errors. If you have a problem in general, if you ever have an error, I say look at the error message first. If you can figure out what the error message is saying, perfect. Try to fix whatever the problem is. If the error persists, try reading through your code and following its flow. Okay, remember I taught you what the flow is, right, of the control flow, right? Look through the control flow. If I have an if statement, follow the if statement. If the if statement's true, go through it. If it's false, go to its else. And if the else is, yeah, so go to its else. And once the else completes, check what the next line of code is. If it's a function, read the original code inside the function and then continue to whatever line is after the calling of the function. So make sure you follow the computer's logical control flow. Another thing that you need to do in general if you have an error is if you have a really complicated amount of code, try doing simple things first. If for some reason your motor is not spinning at all and it's not a syntax error, and it doesn't even give you an error message, first things first, I suggest try just using the spin thing without a stop block. Just try spinning it. I know it'll infinitely spin, but just try having it spin. If it doesn't spin at all, maybe it's a problem with the motor itself. Maybe the motor got burnt out and there's a physical problem. If it does spin though, then you know you're missing something else. So now what you do is try adding a wait and then adding a stop. By the way, you might have forgotten a wait and that's why it always stopped. So that's another thing to check for. And then once you put in the stop, if it still works perfectly fine, now check what was the bigger level problem. How does my um motor spin even get called? Like, where does it happen? If it happens inside a function, did I call the function? So these are all questions that you should ask yourself when you're dealing with an error. That how is my computer understanding my code? Especially for logic errors, that's how you need to think. If it's just a syntax error, you'll find the answer in the error message. But if it's a logic error, you're going to have to think through these questions. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you understood the stuff in my course. I know I can be very repetitive in all of my videos. I know I've been like pretty repetitive and this one, but yeah, I just want you guys to have a good fundamental understanding of how the stuff works. And the reason I taught you classes and a lot of the other fundamentals is because although I could have just taught you how to do this code by literally telling you to memorize, oh, if you want to spin something, you just do add a period and then add spin. And then in parentheses, put in the direction you want. Rather than that, I want to actually make sure you guys understand what you're doing. Because when you have an error, you can't just do things blindly like this. When you have an error, you're going to need to understand what you did. And having that understanding is what will help you get through the error. So, yeah, that being said, good luck. And I hope you bring pride to MHHS robotics.